The first moments of my life on my second canal boat began very much in the way you would expect any house move to, with an unceremonious parade of all of my earthly possessions being dragged out of my previous dwelling, but of course with the added bonus of trying to downsize to a tiny floating home, which meant a lot of that stuff being dragged off to the charity shop because there simply wasn't room for it, and also having a very public procession of my items going through towpaths under marina, where everybody got the maximum possible time to judge every item I took onto my boat and say to each other, "Oh, I don't think I'd have that on my boat." Now, this being the second time around for me in boat life, I like to think at the time that I was more experienced, more mature, a little smarter, and maybe wise to the ways of boat life. And of course, that sort of thinking was only ever going to lead me to do exactly what I did the first time with boat life, which was move a load of stuff onto the boat that I ended up not wanting and not using, and sending a load of stuff to the charity shop or leaving it hidden at my old bedroom at my mum's house, and thinking, you know what, I desperately need this item. I desperately need this item. And either having to get another lift out to the boat from a kindly family member, a legendary grandfather, for example, to drag out another chest of drawers on board, or find myself just simply having to rebuy items I'd only just given away to a charity shop. Boat life, the honeymoon period. I'll be completely honest, I think that the second time round for me with boat life was even better than the first because although I had the absolute overwhelming excitement of moving onto a boat for the first time ever when I got that first tiny little boat way back in the distant depths of time, when I did it the second time, not only was it a bigger, more comfortable boat, but I'd finally got rid of a lot of the nervousness and fear I had about actually being on a boat and travelling around on the canal network itself. And that's something that I've often told people in various videos for well over a decade now of don't be like I was on my first boat. Enjoy every moment of it. Take it all in. There's going to be good times, there's going to be bad times, there's going to be moments where you're lying in bed hearing drips of water outside and thinking, is that in the boat? Has the boat sprung a leak? Has the boat sprung a leak? All of these are experiences that you'll go through sooner or later. And I suppose having done it twice now and looking to do it for a third time, it's easy for me to say, don't panic, don't worry about these things, when I know full well the first time I ever rolled up to a lock with my tiny little boat and one of my good friends, it was possibly the most stressful thing that had ever happened in my life up to that point. Of course, back then there wasn't this unbelievable wealth of YouTube videos that covered all sorts of elements of day-to-day running of a boat, but also showed you, not just told you, but actually showed you in real-time video footage how to operate a lock, how to work a lift bridge, and just teaching you about the general navigation of a boat on the network. And that's something that I think was probably my biggest area of fear when I bought that first boat, which then, of course, had started to evaporate after living on one for 5 years and then land life for a couple of years before returning to like you say, a fancier, bigger boat, but still not a fancy or a big boat. I want to make that distinction very clear here. That is something that I do think is a double-edged sword potentially. That firstly, I love the fact that there's so much on YouTube now because it's preserving all of these canal locations for posterity. There's so much information out there that people can see how boat life is and what modern boat life in the 2000s was like. And so in 50 years' time, all of this history will be there to look back on, that people can see exactly how it was. Whereas, of course, when we look back 50 years from now into our past, we've got a few black and white photos, a little bit of footage from television programmes, and then a lot of written diaries as the main sources. People can see so much more for hopefully all the rest of history, as long as civilization lasts, I suppose. The reason that I say there's potentially a bit of a double-edged sword effect here is that we all probably know somebody who thinks they're better at something than they actually are. For example, me and making videos. But on a serious note, I do worry that there are people who are absorbing hundreds of hours of boat content online who will potentially come to the canals with a false sense of familiarity and a false confidence that they may technically know how a lock works and how a boat travels through a lock. But once they're out there with a boat actually in that water, in a lock, feeling it ebb and flow as the water comes in and out through the gates and so on, they may realise that there's a huge difference between technically knowing how something works and actually having the experience and not going with the flow. I don't want to use a terrible boaty water pun. Right, I'm cutting that little bit of voiceover off right there because I don't want this to turn into a ridiculous boat-based pun video. So, as I say, even the experience from lock to lock can be different depending on the depth and the integrity of the lock walls on these narrow canals. But even at different times of the year, the same lock experience might be different. And I've known boats in the past literally being stopped in their tracks because the lock walls are so narrow and then the ground has swelled up with water, say over the autumn and the winter months, and tightened those lock walls, made them swell a little bit, that people physically couldn't get their boat in, and they've just had to literally pass on by and carry on boating in a different direction. And that's something I know happened to somebody down at the Hurlston locks. And the advice they were given was to try it again in a few days and basically see if the walls and the water in the ground had receded enough that they could just about sliver their boat in and through onto this whole section of canal that you're seeing in this video. And of course, that then creates the worry that if you get up onto this section, what if you get back to go down onto the wider network and you can't? Just a final word on locks and the safety element. Over the summer months, it's almost an inevitability that you'll see Facebook posts about boats sunk in the bottom of a lock. And don't get me wrong, just because it's a busy time on the canal and all of the holiday boats are out, this is far from just a hire boat issue, and it's unbelievable sometimes you'll see a picture online of a boat that's privately owned, that's clearly been cherished and loved for years, and all it took was that one mistake at one lock, and there it is, everything on board totally ruined and sat beneath goodness knows how many feet of water. Well, on that note, I hope that's cheered you up and made you feel positive about the honeymoon period of getting into boat life in the first place. And I suppose I'll wrap this video up and say thank you very much for tuning in. Please do check out my links in the description. You'll find my short books about boat life available for Kindle and as a paperback. You'll find me all over the internet posting loads of boat life clips and photos from the canals and the great outdoors in general. And well, I suppose really, until the next time, I'd just like to say my classic old sayings. Keep it interesting, keep it boat-worthy, have a fantastic day, and of course, my friends, farewell.